All right, so I don't know if you can handle all this, but we're going to throw it at you anyways. Because right now, we are bringing together a fire, and I mean fireside chat, with Backstage Capital's Arlan and Chacho Valadez, led by American Inno Associate Editor Katherine Davis. Katherine, as Associate Editor, covers tech and startups for the company's Chicago and Wisconsin markets, and she joined Inno in 2017. So now let me formally introduce them with Stadium Echo intact. So first, making her way to the stage as the Associate Editor of American Inno. Ladies and gentlemen, put your virtual hands together and please welcome Katherine Davis.
Hello. Thank you so much for this intro. Hi, Chacho.
Hi, I think I preemptively joined during your intro.
That's okay. Arlen's here. Hi, Arlen.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I think I pushed a button that brought up something, so I may disappear, but we're just gonna.
Now the question is, do y'all want that stadium intro for yourself too, Arlen and Chacho?
I think I'm okay. But it was exciting. I was like, Katherine, yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much to Intermittent and Heidi Cron for inviting me to moderate this fireside chat. And thank you to Arlen and Chacho, Backstage Capital, who will be imparting their wisdom on us today. I know a lot of people, me included, have been looking forward to this discussion today. So let's get to some introductions. Arlen almost needs no introduction as she's basically a tech celebrity, but for anyone that's not sure who she is and why she's so special, she's the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital, a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley that's dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in founders who are people of color, women, and/or LGBTQ. She founded Backstage in 2015 and has since invested in more than 130 startup companies, right?
That's right.
And, you know, as a Black gay woman with no college degree and at the time was homeless, she had literally every obstacle in front of her, but was able to build this firm from the ground up, which is part of what makes her story so incredible. In 2018, she also co-founded Backstage Studio, which launched 4 accelerator programs for underestimated founders in Detroit, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and London. And that same year, she was featured on the cover of Fast Company magazine and was the first non-celebrity Black woman to do so. Her most recent accomplishment is publishing her new book. It's about damn time. Have it right here. Recently finished reading it. Everyone needs to read it. And so for a little bit about Chacho, he's an investment associate at Backstage and is essentially Arlen's apprentice. I understand you two met on Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. And Chacho went from working at a Sprint store in Detroit to a full-time role in venture capital. So we're definitely going to get into how you two met and what your working relationship has looked like. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about the topic that's been affecting literally everyone right now, the pandemic. So how has COVID-19 been treating you both? How has your life and work changed since the pandemic began?
I'll start by just saying thanks to Katherine, thanks to the conference, Intermittent, and thanks to everybody for being here. This is related. This is going to be related to COVID because Chacho, we see each other every day, but this is the first time I'm seeing your hair in so long. He's always wearing a hat.
Yeah.
Chacho and I spend so much time together. Before COVID, we were on the road constantly, going back home on the weekends to basically see our families at this point. And so it's a little odd not seeing you every day. COVID, I mean, besides what the Rona has done to my hair, which I will never forgive, it has, I think March and April were really tough for most people. I mean, I think that that unknown sort of terrain and not knowing what to expect next was really tough. Threw us off for a loop, hit us economically right in the gut. But at the same time, we have more than 100 companies that are in our portfolio who we feel we feel a close relationship with and a duty to, and so it kind of got us to just stand back up, dust ourselves off, and just try to work with our companies and see how we could be helpful. And now it's scary. It's a scary time because it's just not getting much better. But at the same time, I feel a lot of hope, and would love to talk about that hope a little bit. And Chacho?
Yeah, I think for me, my mind immediately goes to just a lot of stuff that's happened personally in my family. I lost an uncle that was close during COVID, and it was hard to process sort of that, not being able to like be there for his funeral and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think like immediately my mind just goes to sort of that hardship during COVID, and thinking about how many more people have gone through just losing close family members during COVID as well, whether it was related to COVID or not. And so it's been really difficult, but I've been like thankful for the work that we have, because it's sort of like this North Star that's just like very something that's like good to work towards, and it helps keep me grounded a bit.
Yeah. And we should point out that Chacho lives in right outside of Detroit. I live in Los Angeles, and and unfortunately, we don't have to get into it, but Chacho has suffered so much more loss as well through the last few months, and it's kind of it's really impressive to see how you just persevere through it and how you take time to care for yourself for it, and yeah, just Backstage is I think Backstage for all of us is just like this place we go to for this light and all this darkness.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chacho, so I actually am originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I have family in the Detroit area, and I too lost a cousin due to COVID. And, the situation in Detroit was particularly bad, earlier this year. And it's just one of those losses that, hard to process.
Yeah. It like stings a little bit more in this odd way. So working through that grief is hard. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry for your loss too.
Yeah. But to move on and talk a little bit about happier subjects, I know a bright spot during the pandemic for you, Arlen, must have been publishing your book. So can you talk a little bit? So can you talk a little bit about, why you originally decided to write a book? And, obviously I read it and know what you had to say, but what did you, want to say to people in and out of the tech industry?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't going into writing this book at this time, which was, we wrote it, Rachel Nelson and I wrote this book last year. So I wasn't going into this writing a book that was going to be this full memoir of like how I made it, because I haven't made it, right? So it was really about like taking stock of what had happened in the last 4 decades, like what brought me to this point as I turned 40 this year, and especially the last 5 years, how drastically things have changed in my life and in the ecosystem at large, in the tech ecosystem, startup world. And so I wanted it to be partially a memoir so that you could see that I went through all this stuff. And if you're going through something right now, we're all going through something. So we, it does, that shouldn't and can't, and won't stop you from your greatest achievements, in my opinion. And then also I wanted to have a really strong like business tactical side to it. And it is actually on a business imprint from Penguin Random House, which was something I fought for, because all of the books that I read, when there were many that I read, and I have 4 bookshelves here behind me full of them, half of them are business books, were written by white men. And just like being on the cover of Fast Company and learning that I would be following 3 or 4 Black women who were just absolute superstars, but that's kind of how you had to be to get on the cover as a Black woman. To me, that was just really, it was cool. Of course, it was amazing, and I'm very grateful for it. But I was also like, that's crazy. And then I started looking at other business books and business magazines and realizing I'm not seeing our faces. Thankfully, this month, right now, there's a Black woman on the cover of Fast Company, and I don't know if it's out yet or if it's just been promoted, but that's really awesome, you know. So I wanted that for this book. I wanted to see more and more and more business books written by Black women with our faces on the cover, and I wanted people to walk away from reading the book understanding just how much power and control they already have, and leverage, most of all leverage that they already have innately, and also what they can procure for themselves. And sometimes we feel very much so out of control, or things are out of our hands, and I felt that way multiple times. But then when I started realizing there are things that I can repurpose and things that I can reshape in my mind and in my action that will give me more power and more inner strength, I just wanted to share that as much as possible.
Absolutely. And so, you know, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of Backstage Capital? You know, being someone with no previous tech or investing experience, how did you, you know, educate yourself on this industry and learn that it was really something you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I would say 10 years ago, I didn't know what venture capital was. And it was right around the 9 and 10 year mark where I was learning what startups really were. Like, of course, I had been interacting with startups for quite a while because we all have, but I didn't really understand what they were, how they were built, how they fit into the greater scheme of things. And at the same time, had always felt very much so like an entrepreneur, but things had never really gone my way. I really great things that were pretty good ideas. I mean, back in the day, I attempted a DoorDash situation. I attempted an Uber situation, you know, DoorDash being more so, I actually attempted it. The Uber one was more like, wouldn't it be cool if? And these were good ideas and different things, but to understand that there was a world that was built to actually catalyze and to help you iterate on those ideas was really interesting to me. And so I just threw myself into learning about it through those books and through reading trade magazines and trade blogs and things like that. And that's when I came across this statistic and just sort of the anecdotal understanding from talking to people that all of this capital was going to white men, when that wasn't what was representative of the United States. So it's like 90+% was going to white men who make up 1/3 or so of the country, which doesn't make sense to me. And when things don't make sense to me logically, I have to I become that GIF, you know, make it make sense. Like it doesn't feel right or settled inside of me. And so I just started doing more research. And at first I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if somebody kind of turned that on its head and just refused to invest in anything that wasn't by underrepresented people? Like, that would be really awesome. And see what would happen if, you know, you could pull all that power together. So I started telling people that, and nobody was really listening to me from my place in Texas, having had no experience or real experience in tech, certainly experience in entrepreneurship or investing. Mm-hmm. And after a while, when a lot of us, I bet, can relate to this, after a while, when people aren't listening to you, you say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do it myself. And so I just went ahead and did it myself. And it's not to say that I'm the first Black person to ever write a check. So I know some people get at me like, oh, there are people here for decades. I know that. But what I wanted to bring to the table was an amplification, a sort of all out audacity that was not afraid, was high risk, and was not afraid of walking that tightrope of getting the hits in order to bring to light so many people who are being overlooked. Because for me, it wouldn't matter to me if somebody, what are they going to do, fire me from being broke? Like it wouldn't matter to me. I was already broke. I was already disenfranchised. So I had nothing to lose when it came to having people like me. That part I was not worried about. So that manifested itself by me working for several years with no real traction, and then finally getting traction in 2015, turning $25,000 into $12 million today under management, investing in over 100 companies, and bringing on people like Chacho, who did start out doing, having more jobs than I've had, but like started out at a place where I recognized him as someone that I wasn't going to go combing through an MBA cohort to find the person who was going to one day get the keys to the castle. That wasn't interesting to me.
Right. So jumping off that, Chacho, I don't know if you want to jump in here and tell us a little bit about how you got connected to Arlen and how you fostered, this working relationship, and now as a investor at Backstage.
Sure. Yeah. So I Sprint, just like selling cell phones and whatnot. And I had known I wanted to get into tech investing for a few years. And it really took sort of this, I'll back up and say I was really intimidated by it because I was doing all this research and trying to learn as much as I could about being in venture capital. And I heard all these stories by dudes who are like, yeah, I went to Stanford, I went to Harvard, I studied college math at like 10 years old, like all these things that were just not matching up to my life experience. And I was at the time a college dropout trying to finish school. So in school full-time, working full-time at Sprint, and just trying to learn as much as I could. And I met Arlen through Twitter. I was just trying to follow people in tech and venture capitalists in general. And she was really active on Twitter. And I was just trying to learn. So I reached out in a DM and asked her for a book recommendation. And she recommended Venture Deals by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelsohn. And I got the book. And at the same time, Backstage just launched a podcast. And they said, hey, if you review the podcast, we'll send you a free t-shirt. So I'm super excited about just getting a free t-shirt. So I wrote a review, got the t-shirt, and I got the book around the same time and posted it on Twitter. And looking back, I was just really excited, but at the time I was really excited, but looking back, it was actually really strategic because it really made me stand out to Arlen and the team. And I just kept interacting with Arlen in that way where I would try to send her articles that I thought she might find interesting, and even reply to tweets about the MBA and stuff like that. So it wasn't all just business. I was really just trying to learn from Arlen. And I was just eager to, I was so excited that I would be able to talk to a venture capitalist on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I had tweeted about wanting to start a blog or podcast that feature Latinx entrepreneurs. And Arlen reached out and said, hey, do you want to talk? And then we talked, and she's she had some projects to work that she had at Backstage that she wanted me to work on. And at the time, from what I remember, it was not a good interview. She's like, what startups do you know in Detroit? What have you done with this and that? I'm I don't know. I'm just trying to keep my head above water with school and work and stuff. I started working on projects early with Backstage. And then about several months later, I quit my job at Sprint and told Arlen, hey, I'm full in on Backstage. I don't care if you pay me part-time, I'm working full-time for Backstage. And she said, that works out great because we wanted to bring you on full-time anyway. And so from there, it was just kind of off to the races with traveling. And it's just been a blur since then. That was 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you thought of as a not great interview, I this is what I do with founders, and this is what I do with coworkers and almost everybody that I come into contact with. I'm looking at what you've accomplished, right? What you've been able to do before you got to me, of course. But it's sort of like structuring that based on what your circumstances are too. So to me, it wasn't like you had slacked off by not knowing these companies. It was you're working full time to support your family. You're going to school part time. You have an extended family that you're also kind of a lead of, one of those. And to me, it was that you were able to do so much online in spite of that. Not that you weren't able to do this, and why weren't you? You know, I knew why you weren't, because I had been there. I lived that. So it has been, I wanted to be someone's apprentice coming into this, and I couldn't find anybody who saw that in me, because I was just so different from what they had seen, and I just didn't see no one, even in this world that's supposed to be so innovative and so, risk-taking. They still were looking for the guy in the hoodie who looks like Mark Zuckerberg. And I know a lot of us can relate to that still today, which is unfortunate. And so whenever I see someone who takes a certain initiative, has a certain creativity, who I feel like I can be an inflection point for, that's really exciting for me.
And you certainly were. So thanks.
So now that you have built this respectable and well-known investing firm, how do you two approach investing? Like, what is your investing ethos? How are you deciding on which companies to cut a check to? Are there particular characteristics or metrics or other things?
Yeah, plenty of that. A lot of things go into a decision. Some decisions can be made very quickly. Some decisions can be made on less data and less traction, because of what we just talked about, that sort of understanding where they are today, how they got themselves to where they are with the resources they had in front of them, what resources they went out and procured for themselves, as I talk about in the book, and what we feel, or what I feel at the time, depending on what I'm thinking about the investment, is how do we feel that Backstage is going to influence and help them at that point. So some of these deals can happen because I do look at a deck. I do hear how someone is expressing their vision for what they want to do, and then I see a few points, 2 or 3 points that help me understand and believe that they can do what they're saying, or at least want to give them that chance. So that is like that's alchemy. That's not necessarily science, it's art, right? And I guess I'm contradicting myself a little bit there, but you know what I mean. The majority of these deals happen, though, if they're coming from me directly, it is I've gotten to know them over time. I'm looking for the founders. I'm looking at the founders. I'm looking at their circumstances. I'm looking at their potential. I'm looking at what are they working on? Is this something that would take me more than 10 years to figure out how to do on my own? Is it exciting? Is it thrilling? Does it change the energy in the room when you talk about it or when you hear from that founder? Founder does not have to be a character, doesn't have to be boisterous, doesn't have to do any of that. In fact, like Chacho and I are so different in the way we talk. Like I'm all over the place. I'm like, for the most part. Chacho is like, I've never seen him lose his temper or lose his cool. And he's just like even mild-mannered. And so either of those, or any other would reach me when it comes to like seeing what someone's capable of doing, because we're both so capable. So it's in that person's ability to really express themselves one way or the other. Why should other people spend their time, their money, their reputation on you and what you're doing? And then of course there are those metrics that you can look at. Like, oh well, somebody walks in and they're doing 30,000 a month already, and it's repeatable, and people are liking it. It's interesting. Yeah, you can have those conversations and be really drawn to that and learn more. But a lot of us in the pre-seed, which is what we do mostly at the beginning, our first checks, is going to be this sort of multi-layered, nuanced thing. And anybody who says differently is lying to you, because a lot of it just comes from gut instinct and what you're willing, what your risk tolerance is as an investor. And then we have several people who either are partners at Backstage or principals at Backstage or scout for us. And so there's different approaches that are going to come from. It's not just me making those decisions. And so I'm sure Chacho can maybe think about a founder recently that he liked, or that a company that he was looking at, that some of the thoughts he thought through.
I think for me, what I really like to do is build a relationship with the founder over time and sort of have it be a collaborative effort at first, where we're talking about the problem you're trying to solve and how you can solve it, as opposed, like maybe 3 to 6 months before you even want to fundraise, because that gives us an opportunity, or gives me an opportunity to see the progress that the founder makes, and like how they execute on their vision. One founder that comes to mind is from Detroit, is Javier Evelyn, and I met with him. He was actually the first founder I met with in Detroit, and it wasn't until last year that we were able to invest in his company. And at the time, I thought he was an excellent founder, and I just wanted to like keep an eye on him. And we continued to develop this relationship over a few years, and then he went through our Detroit accelerator. And so like that's an example of a founder that I think that he was really strategic in how he approached investors. And it wasn't just like about getting the check, it was about building a relationship. And I think in venture, it's like a relationships driven business. But there's also certainly things like that we look at when it comes to like founder market fit, product market fit, early traction, and whatnot. And we very, very rarely invest in like back of the napkin ideas. There's always something you can do. Even if you just go out and survey 100, 200, 300 people, like that to us is traction. You don't have to have customers to have that traction, but just to show that you're doing more than just like lip service for your company.
So one of your portfolio companies that I want to talk about is Curl Mix. They're a Chicago startup that manufactures and sells curly hair products. Super familiar with them, and not just because I have curly hair, but because I cover them here in Chicago. They're founded by Kim and Tim Lewis. And so my question is, why did you want to invest in them? What did you see in Curl Mix?
Man, I love the Curl Mix story all around. I met Tim in March of 2017 at a Black and Brown Founders event called Black and Brown Founders by Nia Williams. And it was after I spoke, and actually kind of coincidentally the first time I spoke and kind of broke through this stage fright thing that I had been going through, but that's a whole other story. But I met Tim. I remember we were sitting on a bench inside of like a office hour situation that was happening afterwards. Tim was still back in Chicago with their newborn and running the company. And he explained to me that they had been mixing these products in their kitchen, and they had reached $10,000 in monthly revenue, not recurring, but monthly revenue, give or take. And that they did that with, I believe at the time it was one child, and as a married couple. And I knew in that moment, I was like, man, it's going to be really hard for me to get other investors involved in this because it is so early, and it's not a tech play. It's all these different things that are a married couple. A lot of people have problems with that, with investing for whatever reason. All of these things, I was like, it's going to be hard. And that's one of the factors I have to think about, because I don't want to just give them a check to nowhere. But I was so impressed both with the traction they did have and what they were working on. And you didn't have to sell me on the market, that was easy for me to see. But I was also impressed with like how their dynamic as founders worked, where Tim could come out to San Francisco, have these meetings be at this conference that was for entrepreneurs to learn. And Kim could be doing her lane, which is CEO and essentially, running the day to day. And so I said, you know what, let me go ahead and be an advisor as we build our fund up, so I can have a little bit more to support you with. Became an advisor and was able to invest in them shortly after. They have since done, I think, the last time I checked, it was more than $6 million in revenue, and have a factory and have employees, and are we've been able to connect them with a few really key players along this journey, and I just sit back in awe of what they do. And they're a great case study. In fact, I do use them as a case study in my online course because they're just a great case study in, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't met them that day. And I wonder what would have happened if they had to express themselves as they were in their authentic selves to a group of white men who were handed, a checkbook in their positions at a venture fund. And no shade, there are a lot of great investors out there of all stripes, but at the time they're sitting in San Francisco, and I could imagine them sitting there trying to explain this. And now, wait, you're doing this out of your kitchen? Wait, curly hair? What? And I just wanted to help them bypass all of that so that they could have the majority ownership in their company and have wings. And I've just really enjoyed watching them fly.
Awesome. And, I cover venture capital really closely, and lately have, had a focus on diversity in tech and disparities in venture capital. And, when I interviewed just, a handful of VC firms just here in Chicago, a lot of the funds here are run by white men. And, I'm like, why isn't your portfolio more diverse? I hear the pipeline problem excuse. I think we've all heard that at this point. But, a lot of white investors tell me that they can't find qualified Black and brown or female entrepreneurs to invest in. But Backstage Capital has found 130. So, I'm sure.
I mean, are they still saying that to you today in 2020?
Saying that, yeah. I'm sure at this point, a lot of founders are approaching Backstage Capital, but early on in the life cycle, what strategies did you use to find high potential, diverse founders? What would you say to someone that says they have a pipeline problem?
One of the things I did super early, from day one, no matter what was going on in my personal life, as far as being completely broke, completely, chaotic living situation, figuring stuff out, I made it just policy from day one that you're going to be able to get in touch with me. I may not be able to answer every single person, but you're going to be able to get directly into the inbox or this or that. So I had my email out there in a Medium post, straightforward, right? So that's something people can do, because a lot of people try to lock it up like it's so special. You have a fund, so people can't reach you. Okay, I know what it's like to get 1,000 emails a day. You're going to be okay, right? That's fine. Second thing I did really early on is I started doing like this. Most people here won't get the reference, but the more like the sort of like Tuesday office hours or whatever day of the week it was, I would do that for several weeks. Probably 2015 and 16 is when I did that. And those were going into that knowing that the majority of the people I was going to get on the phone with were not going to be people who could take on venture funding or people who were ready for it, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing that it wasn't going to be like handed to me, but also realizing all you have to find is that one sort of diamond in the rough in that situation for it to have been worth it. And so met many people who would either go on to become founders in our portfolio, or who would introduce or would leave their company to go work for this other company. Hey, let me tell you about this or that. And so that was a way of building network where there was none, right? I think another part of it was I did have this advantage, not a disadvantage, but an advantage, in that those 4 years ahead of getting invested in, I didn't just only focus on getting investment. I did what any good founder should do, which is work with your customer. So I had built up all of this social equity with founders and let them know that, hey, you know, all you have to do is turn that little sign around and say, hey, we're open for business. And I have to tell you, like, going on Twitter as a white investor, going on Twitter and saying, hey, I'm going to invest in Black people now. Send me your deal. Send me the best founders you know, or let people know. That's not it. That's like step 1 of 100. That's not it. You can do that because that's one method of getting some of that deal flow. But you got to roll up your sleeves and you got to want it. You can't just say it because you know you're supposed to say it. And the more the days go by, the less stuff I give, give, because I just know that most of this stuff is excuse after excuse after excuse. If I can do this and not have a place to sleep and not know when I'm going to eat next, you can't tell me you can't find qualified Black founders in this country with a gold card and unlimited resources. You can't. I refuse to accept that today.
One thing I'll add too is that in due time, and maybe the day is today, that those funds are in trouble because there's like unicorn founders that are underrepresented that look at the website of a like a firm where it's like, it looks like you're copying and pasting each individual, and they're like, I don't think I want to take money from that firm, and they're going to lose out on money. And so it's their loss in that regard, at least.
So you're saying to bring more people on who write checks, who
look like them,
who come from diverse backgrounds,
right? Yeah.
And so, you know, Arlen, your whole book is about how to overcome being underestimated. The title of this chat today is about overcoming being underestimated. And, you know, I think that notion and that feeling is extremely common. I know I have felt it myself, you know, as a young biracial person. You know, I've experienced feeling underestimated in my field of tech journalism. Sometimes the pressures of society can really get the better of us, and we start questioning ourselves and asking, am I qualified? Do I belong here? Am I smart enough? And so, Arlen, my question for you is, you know, how do you keep out imposter syndrome? How do you maintain, you know, the confidence that you are capable, that you do belong, that you deserve a seat at the table?
Well, today I do that by looking around in my industry at my peers. And again, understanding, I think anybody can do this wherever they are, looking around and really looking and saying, do any of us have this figured out? Are any of us at the pedestal that they, you know, some people hold us to? I don't see it, you know. We're all figuring it out. Some of us have gotten further. Some of us have, hacked the code faster than others. There's not a day that's going to go by where I'm not going to learn something. So your boss or your person that you're competing with or whomever, they're going to have to, they're faced with that too. Now there's privilege, which gives a lot of people a leg up. So if anything, they need to have imposter syndrome about you. Right? Like you assess your situation and say, wait a minute, how did I get here? How did I get here and how did the next person get there? And you're either going to find that you're qualified because we're all qualified, or you're going to find that you're even more qualified because you had to get through more to get to the same seat. Mm-hmm. And the people out there who are trying to like cut you down, and what I often wonder, and I still wonder this to this day, no matter how many covers I'm on, I wonder, why are these millionaires and billionaires so threatened by me? think about if you've ever had somebody at your job try to throw you under the bus or try to say you do the passive aggressive thing or gaslight you, or why would they feel the need to do that unless they felt threatened by your talent or by what you represent? A lot of these people have peaked and they know it.
Absolutely.
I feel that.
Just one note for the viewers, we will be taking questions in a Q&A session in a few minutes. So I believe you should put questions in the stage chat. So we'll get to those in a few minutes. So, you know, towards the end of your book, Arlen, you were saying that your work and giving Black and Brown people an opportunity to create generational wealth for themselves is a form of political activism for you. Can you kind of break down what that means?
Sure. I think that's a little bit of that goes back to imposter syndrome. If I have any left, because I have very little of imposter syndrome left, but if I have any left, it is probably in, am I doing enough for the Black Lives Matter movement as with my resources and then lack thereof? Because I'm in this weird sort of purgatory where I am not wealthy independently, but I'm not broke anymore. And so I feel this sort of pull in both directions. And so it took me a while, but I had to understand and had to discover, like I looked around again, it may seem really simple for other people, but I'm in the middle of it. So I looked around and I said, wait a second, I'm helping to empower like hundreds of founders of color. And in doing so, helping to amplify and empower thousands of, and that the ripple effects of that will not be able to be measured over time, but we will start to, right? To me, so much of what goes wrong in this country and in this world has to do with economic disparity. I do not believe, and I don't want to trigger anyone, but I do not believe we would have had to watch an execution on live television recently with George Floyd if he had been a wealthy Black man. If he had been, and not to say that wealthy Black men don't get pulled over, because Robert Smith, who is the wealthiest Black person in America, gets pulled over more times than not on the way to his private jet. But what I'm saying is money speaks volumes. It creates power, it creates leverage. And I feel like part of what I can do and just really go all in on is catalyzing other people through resources that include capital. And not just me writing a check, because that's not going to ever be enough, no matter how wealthy I get, and I will be very wealthy I get, or how much money I spend. What is so powerful without money is my ability to let you all know, to let everybody else know that they can attain wealth for themselves, that they already have, like I've said many times now, that you have inherited this already. What is yours is already inherited. It is now yours to claim. So empowering other people to go and stake their claim to things is where I'm going to have the biggest effect. And I believe that will start to affect, and I've already seen it start to affect policy, which will ultimately affect how things change in the country. And so just being a part of that, to me, that is my activism. And in some ways that is my militance, and being so, I mean, I feel a deep kinship to civil rights leaders of the past, both on the peaceful side and the non-peaceful side. And just taking that risk and putting myself out there in a really, really big personal way, it's for everybody. You know, that's how I feel, at least.
Yeah. Okay. Aside, this is more of an existential question, but aside from creating opportunities for underrepresented people, what is it about startup investing that you're particularly passionate about? If the social equity aspect of investing was taken out of your job, would you still be a venture capitalist? So, in other words, would you still be in VC if you were only able to invest in white male founders?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm not here to say, oh, I'm a venture capitalist. Please. No. I would I mean, it would be easy, it would be much easier path. Would be, throwing passive money at people and making a lot of money. But to me, who cares? I would just always be drawn, no matter what it was, to, I believe it would always be something that involved economics and dollars, because I really, really believe that's just that power. That's where the power comes from. And it's so unbalanced today. But yeah, they could keep it if it were all white men.
And in your book, you talked about writing your own newspaper headlines as a way to visualize and set your goals for the future. 2020's headline was Backstage Capital invests in 100 companies, and that ended up happening even before this year. So, looking ahead in the next 5 years or so, what do you want to accomplish? What is your 2025 headline?
And I want to hear that answer from Chacho too. 2025. Well, some of it I can't say because we're just on the verge of talking about it publicly. But what I wanted to say is that I've catalyzed tens of thousands of underrepresented, underestimated founders, and created wealth. I've created wealth for others, and also maybe I'm like the executive producer of General Hospital by that point, because that'd be sweet.
You will be.
Thank you, Chacho.
If it's a headline, I think my headline would be like Arlen Hamilton hands the keys of Backstage to Chacho.
All right. See, and he hasn't made he hasn't hidden that fact either.
No. There's this like inside joke that Arlen and I have that I'm always like doing what I can to undermine her and like take over Backstage.
Yeah.
And I think Miss Sims is in the crowd. But,
is she? Is Mom here?
Yeah, I think I'm bringing her with me. So.
Yeah, that's so true. I think my mom is like driving the getaway car. I think that's what's
up.
But yeah, I see that. I see that clearly.
All right. Well, I think we can transition to our Q&A portion. So if anyone has any questions, please send them through. I'll start with just a follow-up question of my own. What do both of you read, or which podcasts are you listening to stay informed on the tech and investing industries? How do you stay up to date?
Chacho listens to a lot of podcasts, as do I, but go for it, Chacho.
I listen to the most venture capital podcast I listen to is 20 Minute VC by Harry Stebbings. I love Harry. He's a super nice guy. I've been listening to Invest Like the Best recently. I also like audiobooks on my run. So right now I'm listening to Steve Jobs biography. I'm trying to learn more about like the history of Silicon Valley and how things came to fruition. And that's a great book for that.
And I listened to Your First Million by Arlan Hamilton. Great gal. And,
I heard of her once.
And I do, although I'm not a huge fan of AngelList itself, I do love Naval's podcast about generational wealth and being wealthy. It's like cut up into 3-minute intervals, and then there's pieces where it's all together in like 2 or 3 hours, and it's pretty brilliant, in my opinion. I mean, maybe I won't think that in a couple of years, but it's pretty great. And Dolly Parton's America. And believe it or not, I listen to it because it does help me think about investing. It's not. If you haven't listened to it, you probably just think it's like a documentary about Dolly Parton's life, and it is definitely taking you on a journey about her life. But it is a really interesting deep dive about how her music is influenced and influences so many other cultures, and it talks about this intersectionality of all these different things, the South versus the North and this and that and the other. And it's really interesting. And they talk about money, of course, and about how much, because she's a powerful character there. So that's really interesting. And then I just listen to like a million podcasts about COVID a day. So.
Yeah. We have a question here. Who are your top 3 mentors and why?
Chacho?
I would say Arlen.
Good job, Chacho.
Yes, yeah. She told me to say that.
Great.
No, seriously, Arlen, absolutely. I don't think people realize the dimensional chess that she plays. And if you pay attention, you can see that. But yeah, Arlen. And then I would say my wife would be my other mentor. I learned so much from her.
Smart.
Especially when it comes to sort of like having this healthy mind. And then my other mentors, it would be like 2 and 1 if I can, would be my parents.
I don't necessarily think about people as mentors. Brad Feld has a great sort of peer mentor way of thinking about things. So I would say that just recently, Paige Craig and Brad Feld have been really helpful to me. And so like there's these moments. It's not like we have like an ongoing mentorship relationship, but there's these moments where they can since they've been certain places, you know, they can tell me things that I need to hear. And every single woman of color and Black woman who is in our portfolio teaches me by what they do, what they say, how they live with life. Like I would pay Jessica Matthews to be my life coach from Uncharted Power. I would pay her to, but haven't offered that to her yet. Maybe I should.
One other question. So your accelerator program that operates in Los Angeles, Detroit, London, and Philadelphia right now, right?
That was in 2019. Yes, we launched that.
Okay. And so why those specific cities?
Well, I had spent a lot of time in those cities revving up for it. So 2018, I did like a mini tour to see where we would go first. And I live in Los Angeles. I've seen the diversity here. It's not perfect, but in the diversity in startup world it's like not as much of a big deal here. It's like you just are here. And I like that. I wanted to see where that would go. Detroit, Chacho can speak to how Detroit came to be, and Philadelphia was one of those cities where we had people there who were pulling us there, and we really wanted to see where we could go with that. And then London was the same. We just got what I knew about London, and what ended up happening was that I believe every single founder in our London cohort is of African descent, and that was just important to us. And I knew that it was going to be impossible to go to an African city with our first cohort. It was just there was too much to learn and too many roots to create. But if we could start in London, where we already had our anchor investor for the fund, where we already had so many people who were and entrepreneurs who would be ready to participate, and the actual directors who would participate. It was like a great place to start. And Detroit was, Chacho can speak to Detroit.
We actually had the 4th city up to like a crowd vote. And so we had a lot of folks from all ecosystems across the country vote, like bringing Backstage to their city. And we did have like a short list on the back of our minds, and Detroit was on that short list of cities we would really like to go. And Detroit ended up winning the popular vote. That didn't necessarily mean we were definitely going there, but it really, there was like 2 to 3 cities that we were really heavily considering. And Detroit is just one of those places where we felt it's kind of been on this sort of like second renaissance, and there's so much history here, and there's a lot of work being put in to continuing to build the tech ecosystem. And we've had great relationships with folks like Monica Wheat, who really helped us like feel very comfortable coming to Detroit. And I was here too as well, so yeah, I was pulling for it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we have time for like one more question before we have to hop.
Okay. Last question from the audience. Arlen, how do you think social impact investing is different from traditional investing?
Traditional investing, meaning VC. Well, it is a double bottom line or a triple bottom line. And it's for a few years ago, there was this huge distinction. It was, are you a social impact fund or are you not? I don't know that there's so much of a distinction now. I think social impact, like we are not as a fund, a social impact fund, but it is a byproduct of what we do, because every single founder that we invest in, because they are underrepresented and underestimated, and that's just a fact, that impact of that check is impactful. It's an impactful check. But not every single company is working on social impact within our portfolio. So there's not a perfect way to answer this, but I think maybe a good example is to say that early on, there was some money offered to us that said, okay, we'll put you in this bucket of social impact and we'll give you that money, but you can't invest in a Black woman who's doing a nail salon, who's like doing a nail company. And this is by white people saying that what we could and could not invest in as an impact fund. Because so what that told me is that they felt that impact, just like philanthropy to them, was sort of, you need to be down and out. You need to be what I believe you are in order for me to feel that I'm making an impact with my dollars. And my response to then and today is, our very existence is social impact. That founder's very existence, and the fact that she has a company and that she's employing people and serving people and generating revenue is social impact. And so I don't personally, this is just, this is not a hard line in the sand, but this personally, I don't like to put a label like that on it, because I know how it is received. And so I think out in the world, there are social impact funds. I've noticed that most of them are led by white men, because they have figured out a way to get the social impact dollars, and then they make the decisions about what goes where. And again, you have that same problem. So I'm just like, I'm investing in venture dollars into venture companies, and I will also invest into non-venture companies. I am here not to be called a venture capitalist. I'm here to put resources and capital into the hands of underrepresented, underestimated founders, however that looks.
Well, I think that's a great way to end this conversation and wrap up. So thank you so much, Chacho, Arlen. This has been amazing. I took a lot away from this. I think all of the viewers did as well. So thank you again to Intermittent, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you so much. I was going to say, I know Heidi is graciously giving folks a copy of Arlen's book, and I believe Raj will let you know how to do that.
Cool.
Thanks so much.